Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News with me, Katira King. Now, I don't know if you know, but Germans are fond of eating a bread roll and drinking coffee for breakfast. However, a tax court in the country has just ruled that this no longer counts officially as breakfast, unless the roll has cold cut cheese or at least butter on it. On average, people who eat below 5% of their calorie consumption for the day at breakfast are 2.5 times as likely to have generalized atherosclerosis or plaque buildup in the arteries, and that's compared with those who ate larger breakfasts. And the same goes for those who are fans of low-calorie breakfasts. When you skip breakfast, you put yourself at risk of developing a greater waist circumference and high blood pressure, fasting glucose, cholesterol, and BMI levels. So today on Our Take, we discuss the importance of eating breakfast and how that translates to the African society. Good morning, a panel of experts. Oh, well, look at how they laugh. Do you not believe in yourselves?
Of course we do.
Now, let's first talk about how phenomenal your dish has turned out.
Thank you very much.
That is gorgeous. I mean, let's just take a look at this. You've got the prawns there, you've got the green of the, what do you call it again? Scent leaf and curry leaf?
And curry leaf.
What is the Nigerian name for it?
Those are the Nigerian names.
But like, I know
The
scent leaf is called ifri.
Yes.
Right, and then what's the other one called?
I think they generically call all of them ifiri.
I see. It smells delightful.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I'm supposed to be talking, but I feel like eating. Right, so we're talking about breakfast, which we now have in front of us, and why it's so important. So I've just told you about Germany and the fact that this tax court has ruled that a simple bread roll and coffee no longer counts as breakfast. You cannot sell or give that out as breakfast any longer. That's breakfast to me? What do we make of this? What is our take on that?
Well, I've never really been a breakfast person. I mean, family-wise and stuff, we hardly ever sit down to a proper breakfast. But it does make sense, because if you don't eat properly, your brain doesn't have enough energy to do what you need to do during the day.
Absolutely. And it also sets you up for overeating later on in the day.
Exactly.
So how do you... Oh, Blabber, go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I mean, I'm sure many Nigerians would agree with them, because, I mean, here you've got people having salad.
I know people eat eba for breakfast.
You know, I mean, people go eat on breakfast around here.
Isn't that a case of being over-excessive as well? They say everything in moderation, so you shouldn't skip breakfast totally, because then it sets you up for overeating later on in the day, but you shouldn't over-consume.
No, but at the same time, Katura, they say eat breakfast like a king.
I was just about to say that.
So Nigerians are very much on track.
No, because that is not eating like a king.
No, but what is it?
That's
overeating.
That is excessive amounts of food.
No, but the thing
when you see people with mountains of eba.
No, but the thing now is, right, no, the mountain is a bit extreme. Because when you say, and I think this is very important, because when it said that eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper, that means breakfast should actually be the heaviest meal of the day. That's what I get from it.
Absolutely. So the aim, as a chef, what should be the ratio of the types of food that you have on your plate in terms of fiber, proteins, carbohydrates? What exactly are we looking at here? Because I can imagine that a good breakfast, should contain lots of fiber so that burns slowly throughout the day. I can imagine that it should also contain lots of protein, as you presented to us with the prawns and the egg wash on the French toast.
Exactly.
Carbohydrates, do we need that?
Well, you're spot on. Carbohydrates should be as low as possible, so that you get your natural sugars from your vegetables, and then you get your fibrous foods as well. So yeah, you should go low on carbohydrates.
Okay.
Going back to what you said, I mean, the Nigerian breakfast. I saw a guy a few days ago have spaghetti, beans, plantain. And he used bread to mop the whole thing up.
No, you're lying.
I'm dead on.
What?
And you know, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of people come from poor backgrounds. So they have this feeling that they have to load up so they can do what they need to do during the day, which is totally wrong.
But does that also depend on the kind of work that you have? So you've got laborers, for example. Laborers,
very true.
Because you actually have that. Because I think people who really pile on like that are people who actually have very high intensive jobs that they do, and they actually need all that energy.
Well, we should talk about good energy as opposed to bad energy.
Okay. Right.
If you pile on a ton of carbohydrates,
you'll get the itis, you'll fall asleep.
Exactly. I mean, carbohydrates are good for like marathon runners. The night before, you digest it so that that energy is stored in your body. How many marathon runners do you hear having big breakfasts?
Not many.
Doesn't happen. So there's a misconception about it in this country. And I think with what you're doing, hopefully the news should go out.
Absolutely. Can we talk about the Queen of England for a moment? Speaking of breakfast, I have a very odd story for you guys.
Okay.
The Queen of England, we have recently learned, likes to enjoy 4 alcoholic cocktails a day. Let me quote this to you. Her regimented cocktail plan, a gin and dubonnet in the morning, a glass of wine and a dry gin martini at lunch, and then a glass of champagne before bed, is one that we've all been trying to adhere to ever since we learned of it in hopes of exuding the gravitas and glimmer of the Queen. So what do we think about consuming alcoholic beverages for breakfast? Gin. Gin for breakfast.
No, the question is who makes these rules, right? So who...
Well, I mean, if the Queen of England is doing it.
Exactly, do you know what I mean? Like, who makes this breakfast, lunch, dinner rules anyway, to be
Right,
honest?
so you're saying that it's not actually, we don't necessarily need to adhere to these rules.
Because what you've said, you raised the valid point about excess. For me, I mean, I wouldn't have wine for breakfast. I don't do wine. I don't do wine well at all. So, I mean, I don't want to fall asleep on set or anything. But the thing is, for me, I think at the end of the day, as you had said, make sure you don't do anything excessive. It's very important. But the thing again is depends on the kind of job that you have. So for example, you're talking to clients and then you have liquor.
Yes.
I mean, like for crying out loud in the morning.
So I suppose if you are the Queen of England, you can do what you want.
Exactly, I guess.
Oh man, how do I apply for that job?
I guess.
You know, for me, alcohol is something that's very close to my heart.
Okay.
And I lived in the Niger Delta for 15 years.
Right.
Where...
What is the sort of cuisine like down there in terms of what they eat for breakfast?
Do you know in Port Harcourt you can have rice and pepper soup for breakfast, and it's totally acceptable.
Well, that does sound like a breakfast
Yes,
meal.
it does.
And it's light.
It's light, exactly.
It's light, but in the West, people see pepper soup as something that you have with beer at night.
Right.
So what I've
So
actually...
breakfast becomes sort of a cultural thing in Africa.
That is exactly what I was trying to say.
see.
Breakfast and food generally is cultural.
Right.
There are some clients that you see, because I've gone through quite a few industries before being here this morning, and there's some clients that you meet that they actually feel that it's acceptable for you to have a drink together in the morning. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
So I think cultural norms should really dictate what we're doing breakfast-wise and drinking-wise as well.
So we are just about to end the show. So final thoughts on breakfast. If you were to leave the viewers with one thing that they need to know going forward for breakfast, what would that be?
Have a high-energy breakfast. Nothing too heavy. Something that would make you feel good. And sometimes these things, it's not rocket science. There are foods that you eat that you know, but there are foods that you eat and you feel like you can take on the world.
Right.
And if you know those foods inside yourself, go for it.
I love that. Labo, final thoughts on breakfast consumption?
Breakfast sets the tone for the day.
Yes, it
so
does.
I think to get a great tone set for your day, just have a nice, lovely breakfast.
Good, I like that. Thank you, my panel of experts. And if I'm to leave you with anything for the day, it would be make sure you eat your breakfast along with watching the morning show. And that brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thanks once again to my amusingly amazing assists, Chef KD and Labo Daniel, for joining me, Katyria King. And of course, thanks to you at home for watching. From my entire team and I here in Lagos, all that's left for me to say is enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.